Delighted to have Harriet with us today. Harriet is the head of talent at SuperSeed VC, the early stage investors backing founders going from zero to one. Prior to SuperSeed, Harriet has worked with some of the world's leading brands, including Getir, Uber, and On Running. Welcome, Harriet. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Paddy, for having me. I'm super excited.
Awesome. Would love to start with the most memorable hire that you've been involved in.
Yeah. So for me, the most memorable or the best or favorite hire I think I've ever made or been involved in is actually one that I've done quite recently for one of our portfolio companies looking for quite a senior VP of sales person to join them in the US. And the reason why it's so memorable for me is that the brief was really, really niche. So we needed somebody who had subject matter expertise, who had sold to tier one blue chip businesses within that specific industry, who had worked in startups before, who had run multi-million pound deals before, and who also had the training from like those bigger organizations, but was able to bring that to a smaller organization and bring structure, but still be hands-on. And it was pretty niche to find somebody, and the stakes were super high as this portfolio company really needed somebody in the US to accelerate their enterprise sales. And it was their first ever VP hire outside of the UK. So it was also the first role I worked on when I joined SuperSeed. So for all of those reasons, it was quite an important position for me to get right and to really nail for these founders and to really help accelerate and unlock that next stage of growth for our portfolio company. So we found such a fantastic candidate who, believe it or not, fit all of the criteria that we were looking for. And he was just such a great guy and such a great fit to the team. Since he started 3 months or so ago now, he's brought on their first tier one account within their ICP, which is super exciting. And the founders are absolutely in love with him. So for me, it was just such a win for multiple reasons, because it also proved to me that while I've worked for many big brands before, I found that maybe it would be a bit more challenging recruiting for startups, but it just proved to me that, in fact, your skills are transferable, and that the past companies that you've hired for before doesn't necessarily dictate where you'll have success in the future. So yeah, it was a huge win for me and a huge win for us as well for our portfolio. So I was really, really proud of that one.
Fantastic. What stood out to you about that individual when you first spoke to them or came across them? Like, how soon did you know that they were going to be a great candidate?
Yeah, so I knew that they were going to be a great candidate early on in the process, just by understanding that they had that subject matter expertise, they had that domain knowledge, they'd worked in this space for 20 years or so, which were kind of hitting all of that technical criteria and bringing all of the skills that they really needed to bring to this role to really help accelerate that business. But also it was like their energy, their excitement about the portfolio company, about their technology, about how they were solving a massive problem within this space, and how they knew that they could really get behind them and take them to the next level. And also, as one of those things, like in recruitment, timing is literally everything. And this person happened to be looking for a new opportunity. They were looking for an opportunity in the startup. And so it kind of just felt like really the stars just aligned so perfectly with this opportunity. And yeah, it felt like such a great win. And I knew that he would be absolutely exceptional. But the first kind of conversation I had with him, the skills were there. But the more time I spent getting to know him and speaking to him and interviewing him and diving into him deeper and getting to know him better, it really kind of came to a head how exceptional he would be for this opportunity. And then finally, when I did his reference calls, one of his referees told me that there were only 2 people in the entire the US who he thought who could do this role. And the person that I had found was the top person that they would have recommended. So all of those things has made it such an exciting moment for us and for the candidates. So all of the stars aligned and we knew it was going to be an exceptional hire.
Wow, I love that. That's a really good example of, as you say, all the things coming together. Fantastic. In your experience over the many, many hires that you've been involved in, what's the difference between a good and a great hire?
Yeah, so I mean, it's hard to differentiate, Paddy, when you make so many great hires. I'm just kidding. So for me, a good hire is somebody who fills the brief that you're looking for. They score really well in the interview process. They're smart, they're hungry, they're good at their job, and they know that they'll deliver on what this role really needs and that they have the required experience, skills, and traits needed to fit this specific brief for this specific business at that specific time. So I think that to me is a good hire. But what differentiates a good hire from a great hire for me is somebody who goes above and beyond in all of those 3 core areas, where the entire panel is so excited about this candidate. the process moves very smoothly and at pace. And I think one of the best things about a great hire is like having that momentum in the process, and there's no issues that crop up, and everyone is just moving forward, and they're building this energy and this momentum towards what hopefully will result in a great offer and an offer accepted. But it's somebody who can really tie into the mission, vision, and values of the company that you're hiring for, and that you know as a recruiter, because you've mapped out the rest of the existing team, that this person will be that missing link that they're looking for. And again, goes back to what I just said, but about timing. So really knowing that all of the stars are aligning and that this person has come on the market exactly when you need them to be on the market, and it's exactly the type of opportunity that they're looking for. And I just feel like there's just magic around like when you feel that you've found somebody so exceptional and that they also feel the same energy about this opportunity. So I had a really great actually example of this when I was recruiting it on for a global head of production role. And this candidate was just exceptional. And we knew that she was going to come in and completely change the way that production was done for On. And it was such a critical role in On's journey at that specific time. They really needed to nail this role and bring somebody in who was super exceptional. And I feel like sometimes when you find someone who's so great, you just can't really put exactly your finger on what it is about them specifically, because it's just the whole thing, the whole momentum. And I get that feeling, that emotive feeling, when you find somebody who really is truly exceptional, and that they're just as excited as we are about the candidate, and we're just excited about the opportunity together. And there's this energy around this aligning of these two worlds coming together to make something really exceptional. So yeah, that's how I would differentiate a good and a great hire.
Love that. So for you, there's a lot in there around it being a good mutual fit, not just necessarily a good CV fit, but in terms of
Yeah,
interest, in terms of motivations and the other pieces.
yeah,
How
for
do you
sure.
kind of evaluate when something's a good mutual fit? Like, what are the telltale signs for you?
Yeah, so I think this goes back to really understanding a candidate's motivation. So see this all the time, especially when I was on and typically recruiting for a lot bigger brands. Candidates would typically get in touch and be like, oh, I'm really excited about the brand. I love running, for example. It's one of the things I'd hear time and time again. But I feel like when you're really assessing somebody's motivation and really being able to pick that out is understanding like a layer deeper and really knowing what's going to drive this candidate forward. Like, how does this align to their expectations of what they're looking for, not only in their next role, but overall in their career journey? Like, where does this role align for them? And truly, like, what is motivating them to apply for this? Like, are they fitting the candidate, are they fitting, sorry, the opportunity in terms of where the business is to where it wants to be? Do they have stage relevance experience? Have they solved similar problems that this company is looking for them to solve? Have they really kind of gone above and beyond to deeply understand the business model, the kind of traits and the culture fit that they're hiring for? So I think it's a candidate that's really gone above and beyond to truly understand like why this role really resonates with them, why that opportunity really resonates with them. And obviously for us to find that experience and that skill match, I think that's kind of where I would combine those two things. And that's what I really look for to assess whether that person is truly going to be an exceptional fit.
Tell me, what's the most difficult role that you've ever worked on?
Yeah. So there's not one specific role. This was a cluster of roles. So when I was working at Uber, I pivoted into supporting sales hiring, which for an ops business had its unique challenges. So we were recruiting for salespeople to join the Uber Eats team to help them kind of manage relationships with their restaurant partners. And it was a nightmare from start to finish until we really figured out how to find great people for this opportunity and how to manage them through the process, and how to also manage the hiring managers. So the UK was obviously a critically important market for Uber Eats, and they really had to get this right. But all of the hiring managers for these sales roles were ops people. And so their expectations around what a salesperson or an account manager type profile would be was heavily skewed by their experiences being in ops. And we all know ops people at Uber are very analytical and very kind of hot on their numbers, and to a level that maybe some traditional account manager type profiles maybe aren't. And so their expectations of what they were looking for in a candidate was completely kind of different to what was typically out there on the market for this type of role. And also for the seniority level that we were hiring for, the salary banding, they were obviously low. I think every recruiter kind of goes through these challenges where they're trying to find a unicorn for relatively low salary level. And I was just looking through all of the feedback from all of the past interviews that had people who'd gone for these roles. And there were so many consistent themes of why people weren't making it to the next level. So I really tried to like spend time dissecting and understanding exactly what was going wrong with each of these interviewing processes. For example, the expectations of the stakeholders, we just talked about that a little bit, but trying to realign those and explain to them like what these roles in other companies really look like and what these types of candidates look like in other businesses, and how we potentially need to be a bit more flexible than we have been, and hire for talent and hire for someone who can grow into the role a little bit more, so long as they have some of the core like skills and technical abilities that we were looking for. But it was also managing those candidates through the process. So really trying to understand like how to prep those candidates to make sure that they were not going to fall down in the interview process, because often some of our hiring managers would ask them some crazy questions in the interview processes which would completely throw off these smart, very capable people, and it would ultimately result in them not making it through the next step of the process. So ensuring that you're prepping your candidate well enough to know that they know what they know what's coming, and they know what to expect in an interview process. So that was a huge unlock for me when I realized. And it's not about telling them what's coming. It's about giving them the skills and the information they need to excel in their interview to help them kind of get through the process when you know it's a particularly challenging role and particularly challenging profile to hire for. So it was, and also then, sorry, another thing on that was really making sure that the interviewing panel was consistent. So we were recruiting maybe 10 of these roles at any one time. So we needed a big funnel of candidates coming through the process. We needed to make sure those candidates knew what to expect in the interviewing process. And we wanted to make sure that each of the panel members were focusing on their specific areas consistently. So they got to know really what good looks like with that area that they were focusing on, and really forward planning and making sure that we were having plenty of time blocked in people's diaries. Things were moving consistently and things were moving at a good pace. And it took a lot of trial and error, but eventually we did get to a place where it started to run like a machine, and we started closing some really critical roles, which was super exciting. And I think for me, the highlight of all of this was, I think it was right before I actually ended up leaving Uber. I had a debrief of 4 candidates, and all 4 candidates had all yeses from the entire panel. And that was a huge win for me, because I felt like finally I cracked how to hire these roles. So yeah, that was a huge win. But just shows that if you keep persevering and you keep trying to be creative and problem solve and dissect what the issues really are, you can really kind of move the needle and alleviate that hiring pain that so many hiring managers experience.
Love that. That's a really good example. If you were talking to somebody who found themselves in a position where they've got, a similar challenge, I guess what would be the top tip that you'd give a recruiter in that scenario on how to navigate those tricky situations?
Yeah, I think going and looking at what's happened before and really understanding what are the key themes of why things keep going wrong, dissecting those problems at the root cause. So for me, I knew it was that the hiring manager's expectations were pretty high, in comparison to what was realistic and what they actually could get. And then I also knew that the candidates were not being prepped enough. They were not being set expectations around what was expected of them in the interviewing process. And then it was also thinking kind of holistically, like beyond just the candidates and the hiring managers. It's the entire panel. It's every influencer in that interview process, from the GMs to people in HR. Like, who else is going to have an opinion on this hire, and who else is this hire going to touch? So really kind of thinking beyond just who is immediately involved in the hiring process, and problem solving each of those things individually by kind of tackling that with data and looking at what's gone wrong and looking at what's worked out before in the past. And yeah, trying to break through and find a way through, and giving yourself time and patience to go through that experience. But yeah, those are some of the things that I'd say if someone is having a similar problem.
Super smart. That's a great example. We've all had hires that haven't worked out. When you've had that happen in the past, have there ever been any commonalities, any kind of like similar patterns that you've observed of candidates that don't necessarily land well and don't necessarily do as well as we'd hoped in the role?
Yeah, so for me, this is both sides, both the candidates and the hiring manager side. So For me, with the hiring manager side, it's the investment from the hiring manager into the interviewing process at all. Like, I've had it where I've launched roles with hiring managers and then haven't managed to connect with them for like 3 weeks because they're saying that they're super busy. And that obviously impacts the pace of the process and can also hinder the relationship that you have with your hiring manager. So really kind of understanding that they're ready to hire, they're invested, they're going to commit the time that needs to be done, and know that they understand that you're working as a team and you're working as a duo. So knowing that the hiring manager is on board and knowing that they know that you're going to be their advisor and you're going to help them get to the point where they need to be to make the hiring decision that they need to make. And then from a candidate's perspective, for me, it's the pace, how quickly they're getting back to you, the way that they communicate on email, the way that they communicate and talk to you about the opportunity, the pitch in their voice when they tell you about their interviews and how it went, like how often they're in touch with you. I think for me, it's kind of like having both of those things, because you can truly understand, like both from a hiring manager's perspective of, are they ready to hire? Do they want to really hire this position? Are they in the zone to make this decision, which could really impact the success of their team? And then from a candidate, like, is this candidate just considering your opportunity as just one opportunity of many? Or are they looking at, which is no bad thing, obviously, but are they truly motivated for this role? Do they truly understand like what the problem is that they need to solve? Is it really aligning with their expectations and what they're really looking for? So kind of seeing from both sides, like how can the push and pull from both sides, I think is really important to work out like why a hire isn't going to work or why a hire is going to work. So for me, that's kind of the two things that I look at. But again, you need to kind of keep on top of both of those things. And if you're seeing either of those signs from your candidates or your hiring managers, is kind of taking a step back and looking at it for what it is. And I think sometimes I like when I have a gut feeling, and I try and ignore the gut feeling because I'm like, no, like, can't just be again this situation cropping up. But often your gut feeling is right when it comes to, for example, especially candidate side, if they're being a bit slow to reply or whatever it is. I think that and I think candidates don't really think about like the perception of how they're managing their own process can come across to a recruiter, and what kind of warning signs we can see that candidate is showing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you develop a recruiter spider sense
You too.
as time goes on, and it's for me, it's always when the pace changes.
Yeah, me too.
So if you're working with a candidate and they're very, very fast to respond, then all of a sudden you say, "Can we jump on a call and discuss an offer?" And you don't hear from them from a week.
Yeah.
Then it's kind of obvious what's going on there. I guess
Yeah.
like when you've seen a candidate join the business and then you know either not make it through probation or leave quite quickly. What have been the biggest causes of that? For you, has it been sort of like a lack of skill? Is it
Yeah.
some of what people call culture fit, or is it kind of, the desire? Like, what do you think the common sort of challenges that emerge in that stage are?
Yeah, so I think some of the biggest challenges, or like why someone doesn't work out once they join, I personally think can be put back on the recruitment process, in that we as recruiters, our responsibility is to manage a great process, and is to make sure that the hiring manager has seen everything that they need to see about that candidate in order to make a hiring decision about them. Like, we're not the ones making the hiring decisions. We're just ensuring that the hiring manager has all of the information to be able to do that. So for example, like making sure that we're structuring our interview process. So each interviewer on the panel is aligned to a specific core set of competencies or skills that they're assessing, that a bit perfectly align with what the role is looking for, and really making sure that we've taken the time to break that down so that we get to the point where we're making an offer and we are completely confident that this person can not only deliver in the role, but hopefully can grow with the position and excel. And I think another part of that interview process is neglecting the opportunity to really dive into the cultural fit side of things. And maybe this is a bit saying cultural fit is a bit like controversial these days, I don't know, but it's so important that this person aligns to the traits that you're looking to hire for, and they're looking to exert and encourage that will drive your business forward. And I think like not taking the time to really focus on that in the interview process, and it doesn't have to be just be one interview out of three at the third round, for example, has to be focused specifically on cultural fit hiring. It can be done by everybody at every stage of the interview process. And every single person on the panel has to be sure that this person not only is going to show and demonstrate the traits that you're looking to hire for, but also grow on them and build on them and be a cultural custodian for your business as it continues to grow. So for me, it's all boils down to the recruitment process and not being able to spot these things soon enough, or not being able to encourage or have people, because they need to hire somebody very quickly, not be able to say, oh, actually, I think something's not right here, or something's not quite clicking. But for me, this is the hallmark of a great recruiter, is somebody who can manage a really slick process that will be able to get to the point where you're making an offer and you're confident on skills, traits, and abilities.
Nice. Yeah, that's really, really, really interesting. Yeah, I think there's been a bit of pushback on the idea of like culture fit in
Yeah,
interviews, but I think, ultimately it comes down to, is this an environment that operates with the same sort of behaviors and ways of working that the individual be most comfortable in?
yeah,
I think some of the pushback sometimes is that it feels a little bit like a do we like them test. And I
yeah,
think it's really important that, whenever you do have sort of like culture assessment as part of an interview process, that it's documented and it's aligned on, and it doesn't just become a, we support the same football team, we went to the same school, we share the same interests. But yeah, I totally agree. I think that, when I think back to hires that have gone poorly, in my experience, it tends to come down to a clash in terms of working styles,
yes,
communication styles, behaviors. Somebody actually lands and goes, oh, actually, this isn't quite the environment I thought it was, or they land and we think, oh, actually, this isn't quite the kind of person that we thought they were. And I
yeah.
think that's, as you say, goes back to the hiring process, makes it just all the more important that we align beforehand, we know what we're looking for, and that we test it properly.
Yeah, everyone on the panel's briefed and they know what they're assessing for. The hiring manager is responsible, and us, to be honest, the recruiters, to making sure that everybody is clear on what they're expected to be assessing for. And then also not trying to force something just because you're desperate, or you need someone to start immediately, and not just trying to force a hire through just to fill a hole, because that could cause you so many problems later on. And I've seen it before, where someone has joined, and like I even worked at a business once where we really needed someone to join very quickly to fill this hole, and the candidate ended up leaving after 3 days. So that was a bit of a nightmare, but yeah,
Three
it's
is
again,
quick.
yeah, so it was pretty quick. So yeah, and it's such a waste of time as well. And only if you spent a little bit more time prepping and organizing the process and organizing the panel up front, then you can really mitigate these problems later down the line.
Yeah, 100%. What advice would you give to somebody applying for a role today, either with one of the portfolio companies that you support or just in general?
Yeah. So I have a lot of friends come to me and ask me for interviewing advice and how to analyze opportunities that they're considering for themselves, for their own career. And what I've learned actually mostly about being here and working in VC is how investors think, right? So we think about the team, we think about the market, we think about the product. So I encourage people, when they're considering a new opportunity or thinking about applying for a role, is to think as you are an investor. So instead of investing capital, you're investing your time. And also it's as much as it's about finding a role that you really want, and that you really kind of resonate with the brand. I want people to think about, like, is this worth investing my time into? Is this role that I'm looking for today? Is this opportunity going to set me up for success in the future? Is it going to be worth investing my time into? So for example, I want you to do your own due diligence and really think like an investor on the team. So are the founders of the team that you're going to be joining, are they uniquely positioned to win? Do they have subject matter expertise? Are they uniquely positioned to make this business work? The market, who are they selling to? How big is the market? What customers do they already have on board? Who is our ideal customer profile? And also thinking about like who they're selling to, the business model, etc. Because this will help shape a lot of the culture of the business that you're joining to, and it will also shape a lot of the talent that they'll ultimately end up attracting. So thinking about, does that align with what your expectations are, and does that align with what you're looking for, and is that something you want to be a part of? And then the product, of course. So what is the product? What is the need that it's solving? Is it a nice to have product, or is it really something unique that is game changing, is going to completely change or revolutionize the industry that they're selling to? So really trying to think holistically and taking the time to analyze all of these elements to really see an opportunity for what it is, instead of spraying and praying with your applications, and really tailoring your CV to show that you've done your research on the company, the team, and also the opportunity. So that is the general advice I give to anybody when thinking about applying to roles. And then also ensuring that you know that in order for things to typically go well, you need to be the most qualified person, or one of the most qualified people, sorry, to do that opportunity. So thinking about yourself as these are the skills and abilities and experience that I have. How does that match exactly what they're looking for? And then analyzing your opportunities as if you're an investor.
Yeah, that's great advice. What impact do you think this new wave of kind of like AI application bots is having on kind of companies, and I think also for candidates as well? I mean, you must have seen a lot of this already.
Yeah, well, it's a big topic. I think the way that AI is impacting recruiting is it's hard to kind of like say there's only negatives. There's a lot of positives, I think, around this. But I think that candidates are starting to rely a lot on Claude or ChatGPT, whatever your weapon of choice is, to really help them with their application and their interviewing processes and the way that they generally communicate. So I find it so obvious now, and people have used ChatGPT or AI to help submit their applications. If I'm just thinking, for example, specifically with applications for people to join here, I've actually put a disclaimer on our applications that people have to tick to say that they know that we're analyzing their written communication skills, that we do use AI, obviously, but we want to see from their perspective and from their own words themselves why they want to join SuperSeed. And I found that has helped, but I still know as someone who's used AI, and like, we love AI here. We invest in AI. I think that I'm always going to look for candidates who are AI savvy, but it's like knowing when to use it and not letting it take over and be completely change your tone of voice. But you need to be yourself, and you need to back yourself and be confident in the way that you communicate in a written way, and not let AI do all the work for you. Like, I think that it's great to embellish potentially, but I still think there's a huge space for people who are not using AI, and it really shows when you don't use it. I think actually is what I've found.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the thing that worries me is that it gives some candidates the impression that there are jobs that are available to them that probably aren't,
Yeah,
and that simply by using a tool to kind of make it look a little bit more like it's a great fit, or to, potentially kind of get you through the door, that, you might be able to
yeah,
kind of make it work. And I just think it's a really kind of dangerous way to set yourself up. If you're
yeah,
not going to be successful in that job, you shouldn't really try to get yourself in that situation. You want to be in a situation that will stretch you, yes, but
yeah,
somewhere where you're likely to be successful. And so
yeah,
I think one of the challenges that I've seen most recently with the companies I've been supporting is, they're receiving hundreds upon hundreds of cookie cutter applications, that clearly aren't relevant, but are kind of being contorted and twisted to kind of look like a mirror of the job description. And when you kind of dig into it, they don't bear any resemblance on the candidate's LinkedIn, and they aren't really consistent. And you can sort of see those hallmarks. And, I think unfortunately for a lot of those candidates, it probably discounts them more than it
yeah.
actually helps them.
Yeah, yeah, I really think like knowing as a candidate and being able to introspectively look at yourselves, know your skills, know where you really can add value, and really understand like where that would fit and what type of opportunity that would best complement, rather than, like you say, trying to contort yourself into an opportunity that you know you're probably not the best fit for. And people complain that they've done like hundreds and hundreds of applications but aren't hearing anything back. And I'm like, I believe that if you focus your time on really, really tailoring your CV and your application to opportunities that you know you will excel in, that you know suit your skills, you know suits your experience, rather than trying to be many things for many opportunities, I think there'll be a lot more success in the types of progress and the types of traction that you'll have in your job application. So yeah, AI is great for so many things, but I think you really need to know yourself, you need to know your skills, and you need to know the experience and the value that you'll bring to be and not rely on AI to try and like fit you into a specific role.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice would you give to an individual that's received a job offer? How would you coach them on that process and what to do?
Yeah. So for me, I think it's such an emotional moment. Sometimes if you've been like looking for a role for a while, or something's come through that you really care about, and you can let your emotions get the better of you. So first of all, celebrate that you've got an offer. Like, it's a huge achievement. Congratulations. And just take a minute to take it all in. The second thing I say is don't make any decisions in the heat of the moment, especially when you're on the offer call. take time to reflect on everything that they've said, talk to your nearest and dearest and get their advice and their opinions. And I always say to my friends, like, don't make any decisions on a call, even though, of course, like when I'm speaking to my own candidates and I make them an offer, of course, we want to know, like, how do you feel about the role? How do you feel about the offer when you're speaking to them? But I try and like say to people, like, take a step back, try and like take the emotional hat off and think about the logical hat and think, is this an exciting opportunity? Does it align to what you're looking for? And is the offer where you expected it to be? And know that you can, and I hate, probably everyone's going to use this against me, but know that you can negotiate on most things. So I would always try and negotiate, even if it's a good offer, because you never know where it could take you and what else could work. And just making sure that you're taking a break between receiving the good news and then actually going back with your thoughts on the offer or on any negotiating that you want to do.
Really nice. What do you think about the idea of reverse referencing, where, as a candidate, you do some digging, maybe speak to some ex-employees, maybe speak
Yeah.
to some of your network about the company?
I mean, I think this kind of goes back to thinking like an investor. So I think you should definitely do your due diligence into the company that you're wanting to join. Like, I worked for some businesses, I won't say which ones, that had pretty scathing Glassdoor reviews, and people would reach out to people in the company, and like it really depends on who you speak to as well. Like, I think that I've had my people that I know have gone through recruitment processes for companies that again don't have the best Glassdoor reviews, and part of their process was to allow them to speak to some people within the business to kind of like mitigate any of those concerns. But like, if there's lots and lots of evidence that says something, like on Glassdoor or whatever, then I think that it should be paid attention to. And I think, like, yeah, I mean, if you have an opportunity to speak to somebody in the business who's already been there, who's been there before, like, I would totally do that. And I think it's only fair because ultimately they're going to be referencing you. So I think it's a two-way street there.
Awesome. Last two. What do you wish hiring managers knew about recruitment?
Yeah, so I wish that hiring managers knew about recruitment, that it's a team sport and that we, the recruiters, really do know what's best for a recruitment process, and that we're here to help and guide them and help them make the right decision. But ultimately, they're the ones making the call. But we know what we need to do, and we know how we need to work to get the role closed and get a great candidate on board. And also know that there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes, and just because you can't see what's happening, and you don't need to see what's happening, but just because you can't see what's happening doesn't mean that there is nothing going on.
Awesome. And what do you wish candidates knew about recruitment?
Yeah. So what I wish candidates knew about recruitment, and this may be a bit controversial and something I've certainly touched on a little bit earlier today already, is that I find, and I found this more when recruiting for big brands and those who get a lot of inbound applications coming in, but candidates get really fixated on what they want, rather than what they can bring and what they can offer to an opportunity. And know that I think that candidates, if they focus a little bit more on what they offer and what they can bring to a role, rather than being like, oh, I want to work here because I love the brand, and really kind of developing that a little bit further, I think will make you really stand out as a candidate, bringing something unique to the table that really resonates with you and deeply connects you to an opportunity, and to know that you can show, or to at least show that you can fulfill what they're looking for and what they're hiring for. I think it is something that I really encourage candidates to think just beyond, like, oh, for example, they're a fully remote business, or, I like the brand, or whatever it is. Like, go and layer deeper on your motivation and say something that's really unique to you, because that will be the most memorable to any recruiter that you speak to.
Amazing. Harriet, thank you ever so much. You've been fantastic. Thank you for coming on today, and we're looking forward to having you back soon.
Thanks, Paddy.
Awesome.